I'm Chiedza. I don't remember my real Amai. All I know is that one day, a long, long time ago, when I was just but a little girl, there had been sad and mournful singing at our house. I vaguely remember people coming to pat my back or hug me to their bosoms, whispering.
It'll be all right.
I remember vaguely, too, their whispers.
He is a man. How will he take care of a young girl on his own?
I also remember standing by the mound of soil that had hugged and hidden my real Amai, my hand in Baba's and Baba crying. But as for my real Amai, I remember nothing, not her scent, not her laughter, not her voice, nothing. Almost as if she never existed. Baba raised me alone from the time I was as little as 4 reigns old. Baba was a village-renowned carver, carving utensils, equipment, and furniture from wood and stone. His carvings were known for their intricate, lightweight, and yet rich designs, and he was sought after by the wealthiest buyers in the village and beyond. So I grew up among wood shavings and stone splinters, and was always enveloped by Baba's love and presence. Baba's business made him rich, and in our home we lacked for nothing. I had the best animal skins among my friends. We ate the best meat from the hunters because they stopped by our hut first before visiting other homes. We had the best fruit and vegetables that people traded for at least one carving or another. And Baba and I were happy, but the village always talked about Baba's marital status.
Why is he still single?
They asked.
Why would a wealthy man like him not take a wife? It's because of the magic snake.
Some would reply,
That man has a magic snake in his homestead that makes him rich but does not allow him to take a wife.
I had told Baba, of course, of what was being said, but he laughed it off.
Have you ever seen a snake here?
I had shaken my head.
Then don't listen to the gossip mongers. They are just jealous people.
And we lived happily. When I turned 15, Baba called me to his hut where he did his carvings. He sat on the ground, lovingly caressing a giant hungway bird he was carving. I sat on one of his stools and watched as he carved away in silence. I knew Baba didn't like to be disturbed as he worked, so I waited for him to finish and state the purpose of this visit. When he was satisfied with the carving and had inspected it all over, he put it and his knife down. He looked up at me, and there was a seriousness in his eyes I had never seen.
Chiedza?
He said, and I nodded.
Last week, I sent your uncles and aunts to the Gara village to pay Rora for a woman I have met. All the Rora proceedings have been finalized. She will be coming here to stay with us before the new moon.
A part of me was elated. I had always wanted a mother to talk to and to share my experiences of girlhood and impending womanhood with, and now she was coming. Yet a part of me was also sad. Now I would have to share Baba's affections with someone else.
That's not all.
Baba continued.
Your new mother also has a daughter who is around 16 years of age, so you will not be lonely. You will now have a sister and a friend.
I nodded. What else was there to do but wait? In the days before their arrival, I paid attention to my hair and skincare and made sure I looked good. I wanted the newcomers to see that I was not a girl to be trifled with. On the day of their arrival, I climbed the roof of Baba's tool shed and saw their donkey-led Scotch cart rambling towards our house. From afar, I did not see what they looked like, but a pang of excitement raced through my insides, and I quickly clambered down to meet them. When I got to the homestead's gate, Baba was already there, and I could sense his nervousness and excitement from the way he was jittering about. Finally, the cart arrived, and the cart boy helped a middle-aged woman out first, and then her daughter, who looked to be my age. Baba stepped from the gate where he went to greet the 2 women. I followed behind Baba, very excited to meet the newcomers, but my excitement was short-lived, because when I greeted my new mother, she gave me a stare so icy and a handshake so lax that any thoughts of a new mother vanished. The reception from my new sister wasn't even better. I might as well not have been there. She did not even look in my direction. Just a cursory greeting before she turned back to unloading her luggage. For a moment, I stood there, at odds with myself. Then Baba said to me,
Are you not going to help your new Amai and sister to unpack?
I scurried about, taking my new Amai's bag to Baba's hut and Sekai's bags to what had previously been my hut, but which we now would be sharing. Afterwards, we sat in the sitting room eating the hearty lunch I had prepared ahead of their arrival. It was a delicious meal. Being the only other person in the homestead had taught me to cook. Everyone smacked their lips in joy, and after the meal, Baba said,
In our culture, we say relations are an empty bag, and we fill them up with food.
We all laughed nervously at his proverb. He proceeded to introduce us to each other, and I smiled enthusiastically at them, but they gave me perfunctory glances.
Chiedza,
Baba continued,
show your mother and your sister where everything is and help them get acquainted with the homestead.
I did as I was told. I tried to make conversation with Sekai, but she might as well have been mute behind my back. However, I could feel her eyes boring through me, assessing my skin, my hair, my smooth heels, and I could feel the undercurrents of resentment flowing through her to my being. After acquainting them with the homestead, I prepared supper while they sat by a corner in the kitchen, whispering and laughing together. I kept a smile on my face, trying to ensure congeniality and welcomeness, but for the first time in my life, I felt unwelcome in my father's own home. I wished to say things got better after that first day, but unfortunately, they did not. While they got comfortable with the homestead, I began to feel alienated. Life in the homestead began to change too. I could no longer wake up any time I wanted because Amai would be knocking on my door to tell me that this or that had to be completed before daybreak. I became the resident cook, which I did not mind, as I loved cooking anyway, but I resented having to cook while everyone lounged. Sekai, however, was treated differently from me. Amai would say, for instance, that a woman had to prove her worth by waking up before the sun rose and use that for me. But she would allow Sekai to sleep late, saying,
I raised her well. She knows what to do and what a woman will do in her husband's home. This motherless one was spoiled by her father, so she has to learn.
And so I would grit my teeth and learn. Now, when they had first arrived, Sekai's skins had been so tattered and worn, and Amai convinced Baba to convince me to give some of my skins to Sekai, which I gladly did because I wanted a sister so badly. Then the new skins came, and I was given none because both Sekai and Amai needed new clothes. The newer skins came, and still, I got nothing. And then newer ones, and I was starting to wear tattered and worn clothes, while Sekai was wearing new ones. You may ask where Baba was during this time. I will tell you I don't know because whenever I tried seeking him out, he would be with Amai. This made it difficult for me to raise my concerns with him because she would look at me with a daring eye as if to say it. So I couldn't tell him. The one time I managed to corner him while he was alone to give him a hint of my struggles, he said,
Oh, Mwanangu, I spoiled you. It has always just been us, and you are, of course, struggling to adjust. It will get better with time. Give your new mother and Sekai time.
I could never broach the subject with him again. The day things took a turn for the worse was when I went to the forest to fetch for firewood. It had been an unnecessary errand because we had enough firewood in the shed to last us a moon. But Amai had seen me sitting and told me girls can't just sit and do nothing. It rained while I was in the forest, and I hid in a cave for shelter. By the time the rain abated, my wood was soaked, and I trudged back home with the bundle. It was late when I got home, yet there was no food, and the cooking grate was cold. I was tired and hungry and cold and wet. I didn't want to cook for people who had spent the day indoors, warm and away from the wet rain. So I dropped my wet bundle and retired to my hut. When I didn't return to the kitchen to start supper preparations, Amai came into my room, carrying the bucket full of water that I had painstakingly fetched in the morning and throwing it on my body as I lay on the floor. I cooked that night, and every night after I did my chores, I didn't talk to anyone except keep my head down. I withdrew into myself. It so happened, however, that each morning as I walked to and from the river carrying buckets of water on my head, I would pass by the Queen Mother's lavish homestead. She was the mother of the incumbent king, and after her husband had passed, the Queen Mother had moved out of the royal homestead into her own home close to the river. As I passed by the home each morning on my multiple journeys, I would find her pottering around the perimeters of her yard with either a small hoe or a watering can in her flower pot. And at each passing, either to or fro, she would greet me with a hearty smile, asking me how Baba was, and of course I would respond positively. But as the days wove into each other, I began to see concern creasing her face each time she would greet me.
You're getting thinner, Muzukuru?
she said one morning as she ambled towards me.
What's eating you? Are you even eating?
Yes, Ambuya.
I replied amicably.
I am eating. No, my child.
Mbuya responded,
Why don't you leave your pail here and come inside, and I will whip something for you.
No, 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 Ambuya.
I refused.
I have to get back home early and finish my chores.
She cleared her throat.
Where is that stepsister of yours? I have never seen her carry water.
I mumbled nothing under my breath and started to walk away, but she stalled me.
My child, stop.
I stopped.
Come into the house for a few minutes, and I will give you something to eat.
I had no option. I put my pail onto the floor and walked into her house. She passed me a piece of baked chimoto in warm honeyed milk, and I gulped it all down. I thanked her and went back outside to get my pail, which I again balanced atop my head and briskly walked home. It became our routine. The Queen Mother would not let me pass without a warm meal in my stomach, and as I ate, she would tell me stories about her son, the king, and all her other children, and how she did not miss the palace. She asked several times if everything was okay at home. I would nod, not wanting to badmouth my father, and she would nod too. All the while, my skins were becoming more and more tattered. I no longer spent time with my friends because I was too shy to be around them in my old clothes. In fact, Sekai had become the extroverted one, hanging out with my old friends. So in the afternoons, in a bid to be alone when there were no chores in the homestead, I would go into the forest to pick fruit, something that I had never done while I was still with my father. I avoided Sekai and Amai as much as I could. One afternoon, as I wandered in the forest, picking majanja and putting them in a rucksack, I felt eyes on my back. The first instinct that struck me was fear, and I turned to look about, but there was no one. I turned back to fruit picking and heard a rustle of leaves behind me. I turned and jumped back, quickly falling to the ground as I lost my step. A boyish voice laughed, and I raised my head. It was a young man, slightly older than me, and carrying a quiver of arrows at his hip. He offered his hand to my fallen form, and I accepted it and rose. Our eyes met, linked, and froze in each other's gaze. He was handsome, and I could breathe in his scent, which was a mixture of man and forest. I wrenched my hand and knocked my gaze away. I shivered, because I had never seen a boy I liked before. But this one... Hurriedly, I stood, turned my gaze away, grabbed my rucksack, and sped home. The following morning, I passed by the Queen Mother's home, and she wasn't outside. I went to knock at her door because it was uncharacteristic for her to be away from her blooms. Her door opened, and the young man I had met in the forest the previous day stood before it. I'm sorry to tell you that I am not going to apologize. I know all the bad words you have said about me for the way I treated Chiedza, and yes, perhaps I could have done better, but I will not apologize. I will not apologize because I have spent my entire life apologizing. If I could have apologized to my father for having been born a girl, I would have apologized. All he had done when he was raising the 9 daughters he had sired was spite in our direction when we failed to carry out an order to rein in the oxen in the field to bring food before sunset.
Useless, useless girls.
He would say,
All I did was waste my precious seed creating girls that are going to enrich another family. Oh, my maker, oh, my ancestors, what have I done to you that you curse my loins so?
Being around my father was therefore an exercise in verbal and mumbled apologies.
My harvest could have been better had I had sons.
He would say to us as we trudged into the yard pulling sacks of corn and nuts we had harvested in the fields.
Now look what these girls have brought, a half shed when those with sons have filled shed after shed with harvest.
We are sorry.
We would mumble under our breath.
The oxen broke out of the kraal last night.
He would bellow on an early random morning.
If I had sons, they would have made sure that the animals were tied and the kraal was secure.
We are sorry.
We would mumble under our breath. So when I eventually got married, I was glad to escape my father's household, but not before I mumbled one last apology.
Your husband crossed 3 villages to bring me the thinnest and the leanest cows.
My father had said,
Silly girl, even the one time you could have made me proud, your roarer is weak.
I am sorry.
I mumbled under my breath. Things did not get better after I married, and I found myself apologizing again. I was the first wife, which at first was a delight to me. Every young woman I knew wanted the coveted title of first wife because it brought the respect that you were seen first, and then, too, the power to make decisions over all the other wives and thus the natural leader role. When I then got into my husband's compound, I was so excited and eager to do something my mothers had failed to do, provide a male heir. My mothers and aunts had counseled me before I left home.
Do it quickly, before the second wife comes. 2 to 3 sons in succession. No one will usurp your power, as the mother of the heir, and the first wife then.
But despite my eagerness, my womb remained closed off. I did all I could to conceive, but every moon my bloods came too. I visited the herb doctor, and he gave me bitter plant after bitter root after bitter seed, and still nothing. In my one ear, my friends gave me advice on how and when to conceive a child, but in my other ear, I heard the whispers from my husband's family.
Infertile,
They said,
barren. She should go back. He should marry another one.
and soon enough, the advice grew fainter and the whispers grew louder, and within moons of marriage, I began to sense my husband's sluggishness as his movements too began to grow shifty. I started apologizing again. I apologized when the new wife came and within weeks started to spit around the yard and her belly began to grow. I apologized to my beaming husband when he came to show me his eldest son, Tikoona, in my hut. I apologized when baby after baby was born and new wife after new wife was brought until the word no longer held any meaning for me. And in all that time, my visits to the herb doctor did not stop. I made him give me every root and seed and concoction in his hut to try. Even when he said this mixture was to remove stones in the eyes, I would take it and try to see if it would miraculously fill my belly with a child. I took to following him like an apprentice into the forays he took into the forest as he looked for herbs, and he would point out the different shrubs and flowers to me.
This is for a festering wound.
He would say as he peeled the bark off a tree.
This is for a rotten tooth.
He would say, squeezing the juices of a sapling into a bottle.
This is for a crying baby who refuses to quieten.
He would say, wrapping up a root he had dug from the soil and placing it into his rucksack of potions.
The feathers of the hungry bird
He would say, rummaging in an empty nest.
are used in the meals of flighty husbands to help them stay grounded at home.
He would also point out the shrubs and the mushrooms that I should never touch, telling me which had a longer incubation till death and which could kill instantly. I took to learning like a woman with nothing else to do, and I became an expert at digging up roots and making potions, and for a long time nothing happened. Then one afternoon, 10 years into my marriage, after a hearty meal of Nemo and Mahu, I hiccuped and felt the meal regurgitating somewhere in my throat. I stood and rushed to the nearby bush where I left the meal, took some herbs to settle my stomach, and went to lay down. But the vomit became an everyday occurrence, and I held my heart in my hands. Either I had a serious condition or I was expecting. When my blood didn't come by the end of the moon, I was ecstatic. Finally, something to prove myself in the homestead. I knew how important it was for me to have a boy. As the eldest wife, my son would still be the heir, so I pleaded with my ancestors for a boy.
Please.
I spoke to the unseen, long-departed entities.
For all the years I have not forsaken you, even when I was the laughingstock of the entire community. Please give me a boy.
But I found myself apologizing again when I gave birth to a girl.
Next one.
I promised my husband,
Next one will be a boy.
and I closed my ears to the snide remarks of another of my failures. Then I got to know the little I had named Sekai, and who evaded me for so long, I fell in love. Her essence was enchanting. Her baby scents filled my nostrils and my tiny hut with love. Her coos and her baby cries made me joyful because they confirmed to me that I was indeed a woman. A mother. That was when I stopped apologizing. If I had failed to give my husband an heir, then so what? That was his problem. I now had my own heir, and she would never go through life apologizing. In the years that ensued, I poured all I could into my daughter, Yes, I continued to try for an heir or another child, but my attempts were half-hearted. I had already failed. What was the point in trying too hard? So I gave Sekai my all. When we got the leanest chunk of meat, as there was no boy in my home to warrant us more meat, I dished it all up for my daughter. I gave her my best skins. I cooked her my most delicious meals in the fields. When the other children worked their portions, I forbade mine from working and did double duty. All because I wanted my daughter to have it better than I had ever had, and so she would never have to apologize. As Sekai grew older, I began noticing that she had a talent. Her singing voice was so golden that whenever she opened her larynx to sing, even the birds stilled and listened to her. Even the wind took a breather. Her voice was so good she could sing the goats into the pens and stall a hyena from its thieving mission. One day when she was 12 and she had sung to the family after supper, I had nudged my husband.
Look at your daughter. Listen to how good she is. She will enrich any home she marries into. Which is why when the time is right, we should find a good husband for her, and you will get a good bride price.
But he had laughed.
She is not going to marry a rich husband. Remember Tongai?
He asked me, and I nodded. Tongai was a herdsman, and he had dedicated his life to taking care of people's livestock in the pastures, and he had no livestock of his own.
Yes.
My husband continued,
Tongai's father and my father were friends, and they had agreed upon each other that they would exchange a daughter and a son to give Tongai's family's name some strength. But both men had only sons. And as the eldest son, it is now up to me to ensure that that vow is upheld. Your daughter, Sekai, is the daughter of the eldest wife, and she will marry Tongai's son once she is of age.
My jaw dropped, and I found myself wanting to apologize again, but I stopped myself in my tracks. My own daughter, the one I was sacrificing everything for, marry a pauper, never. So the next day I went into the forest and looked for the deadly herbs the herb doctor had pointed out to me. In my hut, I pounded them mercilessly while thinking of a plan. I had to be as far from him when it happened. The poison was instant, and I wanted to finger point it at me. Then the plan came. The third wife had an 8-year-old son who could not speak but could hear. So one morning we, the wives and the children, prepared to go to the fields, while my husband prepared to go to the Endari to drink with his friends. I stole his gourd, the favorite one he refused to share with anyone, placed some of the poisonous potion in the handle, and after he had gone, sent the mute boy with the gourd. The news of his death came while we were in the fields, and after we buried him, his eldest son, Tichona, became head of the house. I did not care much about him, even though he was unkind to my daughter and me. All that mattered was that the second step of the plan had to be put in motion. I had the feathers of the hungry bird. Now I had to find a wealthy man who would bring me dignity and uplift my daughter from the drudgeries that she was accustomed to. I heard of him before I saw him, a wealthy Carver who had no wife but loved his daughter so much that he had vowed to have no other children and make his daughter his sole heir. To meet him, I stole the beautiful skins of the second wife and went to his home a village away under the pretext of making a purchase. In his craving hut, he showed me carving after carving, and I add and oohed over them, waiting for a temporary lapse in his concentration in which I sprinkled the ground hungway feathers into his gourd. It was a whirlwind romance. One day he was following me to my village and camping outside our homestead with a carving I could not afford. The next he had lined up a procession of cattle for my rura. Yes, I did see the girl when we arrived at the Carver's homestead, and I could see she was spoiled. But to be honest, she was none of my business. I had not come here for her. I had come to give my daughter something I had never had, an unapologetic life. Yes, as the woman of the homestead, I had to clip her feathers a little. She had been the only female in the homestead for too long, and she had so much superiority in her. By clipping her feathers, I wanted her to know that I was the mother of the house. I made her work around the homestead, and again, I will not apologize for that. No woman has ever died from working hard, from sweeping the floor, from cooking for a family of 4. I had done more work when I was her age, harnessing oxen big enough to trample me to sludge and lugging loads of rapoko and millet into the homestead, and I did not die. The work the girl did was just what other unspoiled girls her age around the world did. If I had been cruel or wicked with the girl, then believe me, she would have gone the route that Sekai's father took. But the girl was really no threat, and we needed someone to help around the house. So I was not cruel to her. I let her eat, I let her wander out of the compound, I let her be. What my main concern was my daughter and how I could get her to have a great match. The Carver's home was perfect in positioning, as many a wealthy man crisscrossed the yard to get carvings made and collected. So in the afternoons, I sat by the gate, assessing the men by their skins and seeing which ones were worthy for my daughter's entertaining voice. And when the call to entertain at the prince's initiation came, I was ready for it. The prince himself, the heir to the throne. If only my daughter would woo him, and he would see her and they got closer. Then I would use some of the ground powder from the hungry bird's feathers into the prince's gourd. Then Sekai would never have to apologize. The end.